Hey there! Today we're taking a look at a timeless classic of a Half-Life 1 mod. One that I think is a great example of both the greatness and the flaws of Half-Life modding. Azure Sheep. This mod released way back in 2001, about 2 months after Blue Shift, which means that it must have been mostly completed before Blue Shift was released. The latest version of this mod has released not even half a year ago, though I get into why you should not use that mod. We also got a full remake in the works, and I will also cover another mod that has tie-ins to Azure Sheep's story. But let me not get ahead of myself. I'll be summarizing, analyzing and reviewing Azure Sheep and tell you everything that you need to know about it and why I go as far as to say that in certain aspects, it is the Blue Shift we never got. Let's get right into it. Before we do that, consider checking out this plate. This plates are high quality metallic posters with artworks ranging from that of your favorite artists to those of all your favorite franchises. Not only is there currently a sale going on and you can get something nice for yourself, you also support me directly by using my link in the description, which comes at no extra cost of your own. By clicking on my link in the description, you'll find my page where I put together a few collections for you guys of Valve games and other things. It's incredibly high quality, manufactured in Europe, with each display being signed by the master of production. So if you want to get something nice for yourself or someone else, perhaps give this better browse using my link. I'm sure you'll find something you love. To be clear, if you use my link, I receive a commission if you are to purchase something. This comes at no extra cost of your own and you support me by doing so. Thank you. Back to the mod. Even though there is the so-called enlightened edition of this mod that released not even half a year ago, I'll be using the original version with the Steam pipe fix instead. I'll get into why later. We start this mod in Black Mesa as just Barney, having awoken to our security job. You then immediately see the main reason this mod is still known today: women.
Hi Barn, see ya later.
This specific character is Kate, who will only become more important as time goes on. The intro area is designed with a lot of interactable details and some funny moments. The blocky nature of 2001 mods is still shining through and through, especially when compared to modern mods like Half-Life Echoes that push the boundaries quite a bunch. By the way, most of you are not subscribed, so consider doing that. Also join the Discord, link is in the description. If you are to enter training mode instead of starting a usual game, you will be transported to the Going for a Walk mode, which is basically just the intro, but instead of actual gameplay you just explore the area, which is fun. Actually playing the game though, after moving through a few corridors we see a cutscene of us entering a post. If you've watched any of my videos, you'll know my opinion on cutscenes. Specifically, cutscenes that take you out of the player's perspective and mods that take place in the Half-Life universe, which this mod is obviously trying to do. There's a reason Valve never did it, and even though cutscenes do have their place in gaming, I always believe that it's better to go for no cutscene if you're trying to imitate Valve's style. This cutscene was still fine, but also really unneeded. Our job seems to be to guard the entrance to Black Mesa, specifically the entrance of vehicles. We then get a great tie-in to the Half-Life universe, in which we see Gordon arriving in a smoke show of a car, a red sports wagon. He's even wearing sunglasses. This dude is getting cooler by the day. Also to note, this cutscene at multiple places features custom animations, which is quite the hard thing to achieve in any of the Half-Life SDKs. Specifically the Gold Source one though, so props to the animator. Now obviously comes the big moment that every Half-Life 1 mod features at some point, the Resonance Cascade. I really like what Azure Sheep did with it. We hear helicopters flying over us and see a guard looking up. We only see glimpses of the terror, which I like. A helicopter then gets shut down and crashes right next to us, killing not only the 2 singular guards around us, but also blowing up a car and the door to our post. We immediately fight 2 Vortigons, which is quite the way to introduce combat in this mod, but I guess it is fair to assume that everyone playing this mod has also played Half-Life 1 before, so it's fair enough. The usual practice you see in mods is one where they introduce the player to each mechanic one by one, similar to how the original games did it. But to be fair, unless the mod does feature new unique mechanics, this isn't actually required. I still love it when mods do it, but I also won't criticize the mod for not doing it. We then go back to the same areas we saw previously and enter what I believe to be quite the maze. Before that though, we get shown a cutscene of Kate being surrounded by Vortigons, trying to find and rescue her will be the mission of this mod, which you learned by her greeting you earlier and by the mod's description on ModDB. We receive our first weapon as well, a pool stick, a unique melee weapon that we swing around like we had years of training with it. I love ridiculous details like these, and I think a unique melee weapon is a great way to set a mod apart from others. A small, memorable detail you see throughout the entire game. Even though some of the corridors are blocky, there are some very detailed brushworks you can find as well. A lot of the mod you will come to find is pretty liminal in a way. And no, I'm not trying to go down the Half-Life is so liminal cliché for this, but legitimately there are so many moments in this mod where there are just huge corridors and rooms with seemingly no purpose. It feels like the architecture of a public swimming pool or something. This leads to a very big problem. My main criticism of this mod actually. Let me go back a bit to fully explain this one though. Exploration is one of the most important elements of the Half-Life games. Exploration is fun and rewarding, be that either with new scenery, some kind of lore reveal or just loot. There is a very fine line you have to strike though that requires a ton of balancing and guiding the player to where the actual path is and where the exploration corners are. Valve nailed this, mostly using lighting. You were always aware of which direction to go. Take the start of Ravenholm for example. You immediately see this brightly lit house. You know that this is where you need to go. But until you do decide to move forward, the game has now suddenly told you that you can enter all the corridors in the area to explore them without potentially missing something by accidentally progressing. There is nothing worse than moving into what you believe is an exploration corner to be greeted by a loading screen. Again, the Half-Life games nailed this. never letting a corridor go on for too long if it's meant as an exploration corner. It involves a certain level of trust that the player has in the game, one that they can rightfully believe in, as Valve did it right. Unfortunately, Azure Sheep does incredibly bad with this. The game regularly puts you in front of a choice of two equal looking paths that go on for way too long. You will find yourself running back and forth because you're afraid of missing something. Not only that, they oftentimes split the path up in two directions that lead to the same place. While this might sound enticing, in a game environment like we know from Half-Life, it simply makes you feel like you're missing out. I often ended up no-clipping to check which way it ended in an exploration corner. And hell, even then it was often hard to tell. The two paths that end in the same place philosophy can be good and well executed though. Take Underhell for example. In case you haven't heard of that mod, be sure to check out my video on it by the way. At one point in the game you are forced to go with one of two groups of people. Both of these paths ended up at the same place again after a short time. Here's what they did right though. For one, they clearly made the player choose one path. They made it clear that there is nothing waiting at the other path for now, which stopped the player from thinking, oh, what am I missing out on, I gotta go back. However, at the same time, it does entice replayability because it makes the player think, oh, what am I missing out on, I gotta go back. But in a good way, you get it. Basically, Azure Sheep gives you a ton of FOMO without including any microtransactions, which isn't easy to achieve. Moving on with the mod, I want to note these cameras you see. They are just well made. They may have some kind of lore tie-in later, but they're never really directly brought up. It does hint though that you are being watched, which you will only realize in hindsight. A cool addition. We find our first female guard we can interact with. They have custom voice lines and everything, which is great.
I'm hit, but I can do it.
We also get a bit of foreshadowing in form of a message you get when trying to use HEV chargers. You don't have a HEV suit to use a recharger, yet. I kinda think they could have gone without this message. It kinda ruins immersion a bit by reminding you that this is just a game. Plus, I also think it would have been way funnier if the player was to realize themselves why they can't use them. I must imagine that at least like 5% of players would rage at the charger because they can't use it before reading the HEV on it. We get into this cool card segment where you have to either be quick enough to shoot at mines or be forced to stop the card. Really, this is a cakewalk if you just take the tactical approach, but I think I speak for everyone when I say that your ego pushes you to prove yourself that you can shoot the mines before they get you. For another unfortunate complaint, this mod struggled with forced damage. This is something that happens way too often in mods. I have gone on this rant a lot, so I'm gonna put it short. Basically, having your player take forced damage in an environment where they can't heal themselves beforehand is always bad, since it can lead to soft lock where you can't progress. And especially in a game like Half-Life 1 that only has like 1 to 3 save games, this can be really bad. You could end up losing up to hours of progress if you don't know how to cheat, which most people don't usually. To preface what is about to happen in this mod, which is arguably one of the most memorable things about it, I want to talk about why I love mods. Trust me, this is relevant. Valve and specifically the writers managed to create an incredibly rich world, oozing with stories to be told. Valve themselves of course realized this and ended up creating the Half-Life 1 spin-offs, Opposing Force, Blue Shift and Decay. Speaking realistically, Valve could have continued this trend of spin-off games forever, releasing spin-offs of both Half-Life 1 and 2 that vary in length for a fair price. If Steam didn't end up such a success, this may have been the path they would have went down. And I really wish they still did. Half-Life Alyx ended up a massive success, proving that they still got it. This is where mods come to play. Valve were generous enough to provide the community with all the tools needed to create their own stories. While of course you could make whatever using them, making a mod that is set within the Half-Life universe was the easier thing. And thanks to this we got so many incredible stories for both Half-Life 1 and 2, all created by the community. This is what I love most about mods. The community gets to tap into the infinite potential of the Half-Life universe. I really loved the cut Freeman death scene of Half-Life Decay. Even if that is not a mod and instead a spin-off, you had to see why Gordon did not end up getting killed by the HECU and instead just thrown into the trash compactor. It was Gina Cross and Colette Green that saved him. Tie-ins like these are my personal favorite. This is why, when I play mods, I like to see them stay in the canon of Half-Life. I also love when mods go for ballsy takes on it, take Entropy 02, spoiler alert, and how it took such creative liberties with the Borealis, or Echoes, spoiler alert, and how we see a kingpin of all creatures steal Alex out of Black Mesa. I also like when mods do small retcons. To go back to Entropy 02 once more, they retcon this G-Man scene to have taken place in a different facility. A minor retcon is fine I feel, especially when it enhances the story in some way or just makes the player go, wow. I am always one to argue in favor of the mods. Take Poke 646 and how it basically did not include the comment factor into its story at all. Which, disclaimer, in my video on this mod I totally forgot to mention that this mod released before Half-Life 2 did. Thus they obviously had no chance to do so at all. Which is a really embarrassing mistake. But I still would argue in its favor to somehow include it into canon. As with a bit of stretching of the lore, that could very well be done. Opposing Force is the prime example. Its introduction of Race X is perhaps the most controversial canon discussion in all of gaming, which I'm not gonna go into now as this will blow up the video. As you may guess, I argue for Race X and Opposing Force to be canon. Azure Sheep is another good example, and the reason I did all of this prefacing is because of this scene.
This is too quiet. We better be careful.
Okay, so I know a lot of you are looking like this right now. Yeah, making Gordon talk was an odd choice to say the least. I really like that they retconned the death of this specific security guard and make you play as him, fighting alongside Gordon from another perspective. This scene would have been perfect, was Gordon not to talk. We even see him move into the faithful room where he gets knocked out, which we then enter ourselves and see where he got dragged to. This environment is a bit blocky and feels very much thrown together, but getting to kill the soldiers that kidnapped Freeman was great. I do not want to claim that this is the very first mod to do a crossover like this, but I do feel it was very much ahead of its time. I do think fan service and crossovers can go too far, but it's pretty hard to do. Who am I to argue if I get to fight alongside Gordon Freeman from another perspective? I think if it's well executed, it can be the cherry on top, so to speak. This scene ended up giving me mixed feelings. Having the guard live is quite a big retcon, but I was ready to let that go if Freeman was not to talk. Freeman talking is such an incredibly odd choice. Sadly, I do have to talk about another problem of this mod, which is health. I personally am more of a veteran of the Source games of Half-Life, and I'm not afraid to admit that I am not the best at combat in Half-Life 1. Though I do certainly have more experience than a lot of people. And thus I feel fair in saying that this mod is really hard. Not only is there far too little health scattered around, which leaves you getting into combat situation with somewhere around 10 HP a lot of times, said combat situations also have no cover, especially in certain fights against Vortigons, where they just aimbot you down in a huge room with no cover. I personally opted to just enable God mode at a certain point while recording footage for this video, so yeah, don't be surprised to see me not die in the background footage. I did like this area with destructible walls though, made me feel like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. Going back to some crossovers, we walk past a garage and see Gordon Freeman's car from the intro. We also see another race car. Damn, the paint must have been really good at Black Mesa. We then go into reference galore, in which we see a lot of the areas that were previously inaccessible in the intro train ride of Half-Life 1. Once more, these are connected by lots of needless hallways, which makes you question why the place is even this large at all, if all they use it for is just huge hallways. We also get to access the area where we saw Barney knocking on the door. Of course, during the development of this mod, Lucia had not yet released, thus this is a completely inaccurate crossover. Of course, to no fault of their own. And I'm sure if they were to remake this, they would fix this. Disclaimer, they actually did not do that in the Enlightened patch, even though they did do a bunch of map edits, but more on that later. Spoiler alert, it wasn't made by the same team. If there's one thing Azure Sheep did right, it is this tank that we see drive along the rails. This happens on multiple occasions, teasing this enemy, until we eventually have somewhat of a boss fight against it. We are in this cargo area full of containers with a few assets placed around, the tank standing on the rails next to us. This made for an excellent arena. Though it sadly is cut short and rather anticlimactic because we simply have to move past it. I really wish the player would have been tasked with climbing up some area where you reach a mounted turret or something where you can then face off against the tank. But oh well, instead of that we move into an arena with more Vortigons with no car fucking shit. There's then another slightly inaccurate crossover where we crash down onto the path we saw at the beginning of Half-Life 1. Again, slightly low inaccurate though, as it is not broken. The developers probably simply missed this when playing Half-Life 1, as you did have to head back to the optional path to see it after the incident, which lots of people probably didn't do. It was at this point that the game began to feel quite stretched out. The overly long hallways, way too little autosaves that threw you back a solid 10 minutes, combined with unfair combat began to get stale really quick. The gameplay changes up though, thankfully, as the story finally progresses. Some of the boring mazy environments were actually filled with unique labs, featuring one of pretty much every Zen creature trapped inside of its containers. We also see a new type of Vortigon, purple ones. I failed to notice any difference between them and usual Vortigons, so whatever difference may exist between them is negligible. We quickly get to learn why all these labs and the purple Vortigons exist, as we get gassed by no one else but the G-Man himself. Why he needs to do this when he can just teleport people around is unclear, but he does. You awake in a glass container filled with water alongside other scientists and jump toads. We then see as the G-Man, alongside assassins, forces the scientists to conduct an experiment. The experiment seemingly combines the scientist and jump toad into one, creating another purple Vortigon. I actually don't mind this idea itself at all. It's interesting to say the least, and I don't see how this could intervene with any existing Half-Life lore. So far so good? Maybe? I don't know. G-Man leaves the room just as Kate enters it, killing everyone and freeing us, specifically only us, which is pretty funny. Poor Sap. Then begins a fun section where we follow Kate. She can not only shoot but also kick at enemies. We are her companion way more than she is ours. A nice mix-up of things, especially for a Half-Life 1 mod. I also like the twist on the story. After attempting to rescue Kate for the entirety of the mod, it ended up with her rescuing us. We lost all our weapons after being kidnapped, and before we find them again, we actually get our own HEV suit, a blue one to be exact. And I have to shout out the mod for a very nice detail here. Up until this point, whenever there was a cutscene, we only had the vest on. After this point, we will always be wearing the HEV suit ourselves. Also, the view mod will change for the weapons, which, if you have some knowledge of how the engine functions, you would know that this doesn't work. You can't just switch out the view mod when weapons on a trigger. Well, the mod figured out a pretty clever workaround. If you are to cheat all weapons using Impulse 101, you will find that you have 2 of a lot of weapons. This is because in order to switch out the arm view model, the developer simply figured that the best way would be to create a duplicate of each weapon you receive pre and post HEV suit. This is also why we only get the HEV suit after losing all the weapons. They had to reset the player's weapons in order to hand them all of the new ones, with no duplicates. Incredibly clever, I love to see stuff like this in mods. There's then a bit of looping back and forth around mazy levels here. I did enjoy the fact that you receive a medic kit weapon to heal Kate with when you pick up health kits when you yourself are at full health. We also get another reference, this time to Opposing Force, where we see what I believe to be Adrian at the time, though we'll soon show that this is just a random HECU. The location we are at, however, is still one from Opposing Force. And look, I'm an absolute soy-face sucker for crossovers and references, as you might have noticed. I thought this was really cool. We then just leave Kate behind, because a door required a jump to get through. A lazy explanation I feel, but the mod desperately needed to separate Kate from us for this next scene. In this scene, we arrive in the teleportation chamber after Adrian Shepard, in which we see Adrian running into his portal, after which we run into one ourselves. This is turning into a Looney Tunes style chase and I love it. We desperately need to go deeper. We need someone chasing after just Barney now. We arrive in Zen for a brief moment. We find a new weapon here, the M9 Beretta. A separate weapon from the Glock. This is because this mod was developed before the HD content pack released, which released the highly controversial HD weapon models. We received this weapon from the corpse of a new type of soldier, Special Forces. They look very different from the HECU and feature a different main weapon. It's named Aim for A1 in the files, but it seems to be its own thing, and has a pretty unique firing sound. It's a pretty powerful weapon actually. Not long after do we leave Zen again and loop back around to Kate, who has found a new companion, a scientist. A great moment that I almost missed because I at first did not want to take the scientist with me, happens here. Walking past this green glowing room, the scientist decides to stop, comment on it while looking baffled at what's happening, and then saying that he'll wait here for his colleagues. These very minor details that are easily missable add so much to our world. I love it. They totally didn't need to implement this, but because they did, it made the mod so much better. We then enter a car to drive over a bit of water. I love how cartoonish this is though. Why didn't the people who built Black Mesa just build a path around it? Why go through all this effort to build a cart over about 100 feet of water? I love it. We get stuck and have to traverse through the water, in which another cut enemy returns, the Archer. A cut fish enemy that had a model with animations in the final game, though went unused. The fish doesn't do a lot in the specific section, but it will return later on in the game and attack us. We manage to enable the cart again and drive Kate over the water. We then enter a section of Black Mesa called Old Black Mesa, as the chapter titles it. Completely dark and filled with cobwebs. The Special Forces are basically all we meet from this point forward. After jumping down a pipe, we see Kate get captured once more by Special Forces accompanied by G-Man. Again, this features some custom animations which I mentioned are pretty hard to do, so props on that. We then get what is probably the biggest half-life lore break besides Freeman talking. We arrive in this outside area and get the notification that HECU are passive. Again, messaging the player directly is really lazy. They could have gotten way more creative with it, such as having the player knocked out in a scene and waking up to find the HECU assisting them. Anything but directly telling the player would have been great. What this does seem to imply though is that we are in the later stages of the timeline, since Adrian Shepard is already around. In Opposing Force we see the HECU cooperating with security guards on rare occasions. This was simply for gameplay reasons, but it could be explained in lore that the soldiers decided to keep as many people around to help as possible, since they realized the true scale of the invasion. Well anyways, after fighting a couple special forces, we meet...
Okay, 2 heads think better than 1.
Adrian Shepard, who again talks. A weird decision. This also takes place in a random building that we never were at in Opposing Force. Adrian Shepard also disappears again after about 2 minutes. It's just an odd choice that felt very forced. Or should I say Opposing Force? As much as I soy face over crossovers, this one felt a bit out of place. We also meet the Snarks of this mod, the Chum Toad. They are both an NPC and a weapon. A rather late addition, which means we'll never really get to use it. Snarks are useless anyways. We also find rats, which are actually reskinned headcrabs. We traverse through an underground city, which is not a first time sight in the Half-Life universe, though at this scale it certainly is. We turn on the power, which enabled a train or something, I don't know. I was kind of out of it at this point. The mod just kept stretching on and on. The train also drove for a solid like 20 feet, which was completely useless, after which we totally don't fall down this hole and instead traverse past it. We finally find Kate and see her trapped in a container not unsimilar to the one we were in. The G-Man is there alongside Special Forces. He releases another cut enemy on us, a Panther Eye. This cut enemy is also found in the fight of Half-Life 1, but it went unused. They went ahead and used it here as a boss fight, for which they made it about twice as big as it usually is. It is a pretty memorable, unique fight. The Panther Eye does massive damage and an attack similar to that of the Vortigons. After managing to defeat it, we free Kate and the mod ends. Just kidding, it keeps going on. We move through more corridors, receive an RPG, which at this point we have a huge arsenal of weapons. I kinda found this part funny, where we have to climb up bomb stairs while Kate gets to take an elevator. This is obviously done because getting her to traverse up these stairs would either be hell to animate or hell for AI. which somehow managed to be worse than that of Dr. Rosenberg. It's a funny thought though that the protagonist is seemingly such a gentleman that he didn't want to take away space from Kate on the elevator and instead climb up the burnt down stairs. Which, speaking of Kate, as much as I enjoy the character, the companion AI is and has always been awful in Half-Life 1, either running straight into her death or just not following us at all. This is a fault of every Half-Life 1 mod that features someone following us though. Generally, her AI wasn't that much of a problem. We then fight against a helicopter outside, which, come on, can this mod just end? We fight through tons of broken buildings where we eventually find a car and drive off with Kate. Kate puts her arm around the player, giving us a romantic Hollywood ending to the story. For no real reason. The last we see of them in this mod is them driving off and a Chumto jumping at the camera, which is followed by some dynamic credits, which I thought was really cool. However, this is not the end of their stories. There is another mod released by the team behind this mod. It's called Point of View. It's a classic just as much as Azure Sheep is. It involves you playing as a Vorticon. I don't want to delve too deep into this mod, as I plan on making a separate video on it. The mod features a ton of crossovers as well, and also features one that extends the ending of Azure Sheep. I will tell you about it now, but it will involve me spoiling the ending of Point of View. Skip ahead to here if you don't want to be spoiled. Alright, here we go. Point of View ends in the Vorticon we're playing as getting blown up by a tank on top of the dam we know from Half-Life 1. It seems we've died. However, in what is somewhat of a post-credit scene, we see that the Vorticon we played as survived falling down the dam and was floating along until there's a bridge. We then see just Barney and Kate find the Vorticon to take it with them. We see somewhat of a diary entry that the Point of View mod featured every so often, usually used to tell some lore. It explains that the Vorticon will join just Barney and Kate on their right. We then see as they drive off, followed by spheres. This is another cut character / entity of Half-Life 1 that Vorticons were drawn, and have a lot of importance in the Point of View lore, which I won't get into now. So that's the ending of the story of just Barney and Kate, driving off with their Vorticons. Before I get into my final thoughts about Azure Sheep, I want to quickly cover the Black Mesa and so-called Enlightened version. The Black Mesa version seems to be abandoned now. The team moves on to create Black Mesa Blue Shift. However, there are some finished chapters, which are pretty fun. The mod would have aimed at extending Azure Sheep and also eliminating some of the lore breaks of the original mod, probably most importantly removing the voice of Gordon and Adrian and correcting some areas. In some of the first chapters that are available to download, we can see that it cut short on the Gordon Freeman segment, instead going for just Barney talking instead of Freeman and also being shot, but surviving after being brought somewhere else. A pretty clever way to solve this. It also changed G-Man to be a different G-Man. It improved the boss fight against the tank on the train tracks, which I mentioned previously to be rather anticlimactic in the original mod. The mod is generally impressively good and the extensions feel natural. It also features its own soundtrack. I seriously recommend checking it out. I won't go too in-depth about it here. By reading a comment left by the voice actor of Otis of the Black Mesa Blue Shift mod, we see that he confirmed that the Black Mesa Azure Sheep remake was cancelled. Unfortunate, really. Enlightened Edition is a whole can of worms. There are multiple mods that have received the Enlightened treatment. It seems to all be done by one team, and I really don't want to discredit the work put into this, especially since there's so many people working on it. I really respect the effort put into it. And generally, just looking at it, it seems promising. There are new Men in Black in the opposing force Enlightened Edition. The weapon models in Azure Sheep were improved in quality. A lot of weapons were also straight up just changed, which make of that what you will. All the Enlightened mods also feature map edits, which is quite the effort to go through, I must admit. Though as I mentioned, they did not fix some of the continuity errors in Azure Sheep. What I do like is that when you start a game, you get a chapter selection of sorts, which you don't usually get in Half-Life 1. They also modified the purple Vorticon to be able to revive other Vorticons, which was an awesome detail I thought, something desperately missing from the original. What I immediately noticed when I booted up Azure Sheep Enlightened Edition that I thought was incredibly annoying was the fact that whenever you look at an NPC or guard, a text will appear saying either their HP or that you can change their weapon. This can't be disabled in the settings and is exclusive to the Enlightened Edition. If you do wish to disable it like I did, it's very simple. Simply download a hex editor, open the half-life.dll, and remove everything from $002C1CE0 to $002C1DO3. Then restart at $002C1DOC and stop at $002C1D3D. And then also this little part. Very simple, right? There's another questionable thing the Enlighter team did. If you are to use explosive damage on an assassin in the opposing force, this is what you will be greeted by. Yeah, I'm not too sure about this one. While it is of course your decision, and the Enlightened mods are by no means awful, I just recommend going with the original Azure Sheep. Though if you take the Black Mesa version into account, I would suggest to play that one instead, even over the original Azure Sheep. Since Azure Sheep itself isn't that enjoyable, it did a lot of things right, the crossovers mostly, the detailed animations, keeping up somewhat of a story with a couple of twists. But the frustrating level design that just keeps stretching on and on will probably leave you yearning for this mod to end. I like the fact that it brought back cut enemies in a fashion similar to how Opposing Force added new enemies, which I thought was something that was desperately missing in Blue Shift. It also felt a lot more interconnected to an overarching story of the Half-Life universe, even if it did take quite huge creative liberties for this. Comparing it to Blue Shift though, which is kinda what I hinted at throughout, Blue Shift is definitely the superior product. The only reason I'd recommend playing Azure Sheep is because it is an important piece of history in the Half-Life modding scene. And of course it does have its moments. If you want a real great experience, check out Black Mesa Azure Sheep. I hope it gets finished one day because it's genuinely great, though that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. Black Mesa Blue Shift is also incredible and will probably be finished, but I'll talk about that mod in another video, so make sure to subscribe to be around then. Remember to check out this plate and to join the Discord. Otherwise, thank you for watching.